and still here for you and still virtual. So if there's something that you need, reach out 100%. I will always help you. I know a lot of you send me emails and ask questions and voicemails and all that kind of stuff. So we're here. You've got 2 more of us here today. So that's awesome. And you can ask them a lot of questions as well. We do have some webinars coming up. One is mine. So if you didn't get enough from hearing me today, join me next Tuesday in the afternoon to learn a little bit and talk a little bit about fatigue and how it affects your safety program. June 8th, we also have what to do when OSHA knocks at your door. That's another webinar, and that's out there for you. Additionally, if anybody came to the webinar that Deb and I and Eric did on preventing falls in all industries for the stand down last week, I asked to turn in your challenge. So you were supposed to go out and do a walkthrough or a scavenger hunt or do some training, just like we had done years ago in the past. And if you didn't get to join that, send me an email, send Sally an email, and we can get you the information for that. And we'd still love you to be involved in our challenge and do training or do a scavenger hunt like we did in years past. So we're trying to collect those numbers. They're due by the end of the month, but just wanted to send you that reminder. We also have the virtual classes, so we don't have the in-person classes as of right now, but we do have a lot of virtual classes available to you in all different kind of topics. I'm actually helping with the machine guarding. I'm moderating the machine guarding basic ones next week, and so those are a bunch of different classes if you're looking for some information and some training. We also have a lot of resources. I've mentioned a couple times the micro training videos. Those are out there for you to use. They're geared towards your employees. So we did 1 or 2 of those were added for the fall. One or for the fall stand down last week. And one of those is safety on the steps, and the other is do you need fall protection? The HAZCOM ones, and there's a couple other ones in there. And we're actively making more of those. We have sample written programs, and I know they're talking about respirator programs today. There's a sample on our website for a respirator written program. I know Deb just got done working with a bunch of folks on a fall written program. I was involved in the lockout tagout one, so there's a lot of really good written programs if you need to either do your from scratch or even just evaluate where you are. So those are good. And then safety talks. Those are out there available to help you with your training and toolbox talks. So at this point, really excited. You see Deb and Rick's smiling faces on there, and we're lucky enough to have them here today. They're going to be talking about respirators, face coverings, and OSHA. I think we should say oh my, like in the Wizard of Oz, right? And Deb and Rick are experts in just about everything, so I'll let them give their, they are. I'll let them give you their bio, but if you notice at the bottom of your screen, you have a reaction button, and it's like a little smiley face, and you can clap or give a thumbs up or cry or make a smiley face, a heart, whatever it is, but let's give them a warm virtual Summit County Safety Council welcome. You can clap or do something like that, but let's let everybody know that you're here. So we appreciate it. And Deb, Rick, off to you.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us this morning, or afternoon, I guess it is. So on the slide here, real quick, I'm just going to do a shout out that Rick is the guy on the left, and I guess he chose the dog, so I get to be the dog in the respirator, but that's okay. I'm wearing one, so that's all that matters. So just quick, I'm industrial safety consultant, so I'm the same thing that Carrie does. We have different areas, but some of you are actually my customers. So hey to all my customers, I'll just do a quick wave. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about respirators, face coverings, and OSHA. Rick, you want to do a quick shout out?
Sure. I'm an industrial hygienist, obviously, and I concentrate on health hazards in the workplace. And I saw a few familiar names of places I've been to do noise and air surveys. So it's glad that you're here. Thanks for coming.
So one of the things I also wanted to point out is that about a third of the way through this, we're going to have you pull out that check sheet, and we're going to talk a little bit. Now, the intent of that check sheet is basically it's modeled after the OSHA standard for written respirator programs. What we would like you to do, even if you have a current respirator program, or if you don't have one and you want to know whether you need one, what we'd like you to do is use that as a tool to make notes, take notes. You know, maybe we know we have that. Yeah, we've done that. Maybe we don't know. Maybe we need to check. Make your notes on there, and that's going to be your activity check sheet on your action plan for when you get back to work or when you're actually moving on to check into your respirator program. What do we need to do? Basically, what your next steps are. Okay. So in the chat, I'd like you guys to tell me for OSHA for 2020, what rank do you think respirator citations were? 1 being low, 1 through 10. 1 being highest, 10 being lowest. What do you think it was? So I'm going to say, are we seeing? What are we seeing there, Carrie? You want to?
Yep, 7s, 8, 6, 3, 3, 3, 3, 8, 6, 7. Lots.
Right.
Good. 1.
Good.
I got enough of 1.
In the 10.
8.
Yep. Excellent. So here
Lots
we go. Drum roll. All right. 2020. So the 3s have it. So all of you that took number 3, you get a free copy of our presentation. Just kidding. So again, not surprising. It's always one of the top 10. We know that there's so many aspects of this. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to present it, and also to cover some of the confusion there might be with just face coverings in general.
It did move up from 5 the year before, so it was concentrated on even more.
Yeah, and I'm not saying COVID had anything to do with that, but it probably did. But the other thing I want to know is, speaking of COVID, do you guys think that there's a current standard for COVID? Yes or no? You can put a Y or an N, I don't care. Yes or no. So real quick, just type in, do you think there is one? What's it look like?
Not yet. No, yes. General duty clause, no, yes. No, yes, no. Lots and lots all over, not yet.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So those of you that are saying not yet, you're aware of what's happening, so good. So again, you're correct. There is not a current standard. There's an emphasis program, but I also wanted to just really quickly talk about what can OSHA cite you for. And the bottom line is it can cite you for a written program, medical evaluations, or fit testing under the respirator program, which is why I believe that it's moved up from 5 to 3. Bloodborne pathogens, record keeping, HAZCOM, PPE, we can get that, but the bloodborne pathogens, record keeping, and HAZCOM probably come from them finding out something else while they're doing a respirator evaluation or checking from the OSHA standard, and they happen to find, oh, well, we don't do this or we don't do that. So just keep in mind, if they're coming in and looking at something, if they find something else, even though they didn't initially come in to cite you for that, they can still cite you in the long run. Then the bottom line is you're correct. The 5A1, general duty clause, you all heard it. The employer is supposed to create a workplace free of all recognized hazards that could cause or potentially cause physical harm or death. So again, we know that COVID is something that could cause physical harm or death. So we must protect against that. And that's how they're getting the general duty clause. Now, I will say that OSHA and COVID plans, there's a national emphasis program which gave OSHA the authority to do inspections. They released a guidance document, and that link is down there. It's called Protecting Workers, Mitigating and Prevention the spread of COVID. And at the end, I'll show you a link to that. If you haven't taken a look at that, I do recommend that you look at it, because one of the things that we've kind of been told by our area director is that they are looking at what do you have. And your program shouldn't necessarily just be verbal. What they're basically saying is in order to have a good program, it needs to be in writing. So go to that link, look at what OSHA is recommending, and I believe there's roughly around 16 steps or something that they're saying that you need to do. I will say that most of the businesses that I've worked with, and I think Carrie will say the same thing, that they've already got the plan. They've got all these areas covered. We just want to make sure we're documenting it and that we're doing this routinely. And then the other thing was that there are industry-specific risk levels that they're looking at. There were target industries that OSHA was looking at. And you can go to their website and look at those and figure out, you know, if you fall into one of those, you could be on a higher risk of having an inspection based on that. Most of their stuff right now is coming in via complaint.
Okay. You know, about a year ago, N95s and respirators were almost exclusively an industrial term that the general public was not aware of. But along came COVID, and all of a sudden in the forefront on headlines, newspapers, TV, everyone's talking about respiratory protection, N95s, and face coverings. So we want to explain to you the difference between what is a respirator and what is not a respirator. So in the chat, or if you can, raise your hand to a yes if you think this is a respirator.
So
I'm seeing 4 yeses, some no's, 4 raised hands, 5 raised hands or claps, 6 raised hands, no in the chat.
Okay.
And just know you have to lower your hand. So if you do raise your hand, then you're going to want to lower it. So.
Okay.
Well, they can, if they want to raise their hand and take over, that'd be fine with me. So
Yeah.
that picture is over there on the right. It is considered a respirator. It's what is called a filtering face piece respirator, or the common term usually is called an N95. And basically the entire respirator face piece is the filter. And the reason this is a respirator is it has a NIOSH certification. And the middle one, you can see the certification very visibly. On the one on the right, it's actually on the headband. It's printed on the headband. You can't really see it. And the same with the one on the left. So these are considered respirators. They're NIOSH certified, and they need to be fit tested if they're required. So we'll get into that in more detail a little bit later.
So here's
what do you think about this? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Is it counterfeit or is it real? So real quick, if you want to take a quick look, hopefully you can see this. There's some details. Is there anything that you see that could identify this possibly as counterfeit? And you want to type those answers in the chat. Does anybody see anything?
Oh, Susan got
Susan
it right.
said the
one
cat.
part.
Yep.
Wayne, very good. Yep.
All right. Take one of those, Rick, and let's go through them, Rick, and figure out.
Okay. I'll take the first one with.
One of the things.
Sorry. The KN95 is not a NIOSH certified respirator, so people are correct with that. Deb, go ahead.
So the other thing, and actually this is one that I found in the field while we were doing our mask police stuff. I was out in a facility, they were selling these, and I noticed, it says N95, and I knew that was not an N95. But then I happened to notice, look, it says KN95, and those two are not interchangeable. The other interesting thing is that it says up here that it provides you 360-degree protection. So I'm trying to figure that out. I'm still trying to figure all that out.
Yeah.
The other part is that it has the ear loops and no headbands. Okay. So lots of question about that, right?
Right.
So here's some key notes that we have to remember. Signs that a respirator may be counterfeit. That there's no NIOSH marking. That NIOSH is spelled wrong. Maybe it's not all capitals. Maybe it's NIOSH or no-ish, whatever. I've seen many different versions of that. The presence of some kind of decorative fabric or add-ons like sequins or stickers or patches. the claims that they have approval for children, NIOSH does not approve any type of respirator for children, just bottom line. And that in the last one, that it has ear loops instead of headbands. So those are some of the key things that you can look for. And I know that when, COVID was in the peak of things, it was really difficult for people to find stuff. So they were looking for anything. And there's a bunch of people jumping on board and trying to certify stuff left and right. So be very careful with what you purchase.
These are different types of what are called air purifying respirators. They're negative pressure respirator. The user supplies the power, but these have what we call elastomeric face pieces. And there's different types listed here, obviously. The half face, which just covers the nose and the mouth and the chin, and the full face respirator, which obviously covers the eyes. And then you have a powered air purifying respirator, a PAPR. Some people may be familiar with these. These do not supply air. They simply power the air through the filters to provide airflow. There's no supply of oxygen or clean air. It powers the air and it pushes it through the filter into the face piece. So it's a little more protective, a little easier to breathe through. The problem with these types of respirators, there's increased breathing resistance, and there's also additional air volume you have to provide, because you have to pull the air through those filters, and then you have to exhale that excess air volume. So they're harder to breathe through. That's why you need to be medically cleared to wear these types of respirators. Then there are supplied air respirators. They're either the airline type or the SCBAs. That's self-contained breathing apparatuses, not scuba, just SCBAs. And those are used, the airline are often used in industrial applications. The SCBAs are used by firefighters and emergency responders, people like that typically. So which one of these are a respirator? There's only one correct answer.
Type the letter in the chat and we'll see. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. I'm seeing participants.
It looks like everybody's saying F.
Well, they got it right. Very good. F is what's called
They're paying
surgical.
attention. Yay.
Yeah. It has the NIOSH markings. It's a surgical N95. And the only difference between that and an industrial one is it's FDA cleared for fluids and splashes. So that part of it's a little different than an industrial N95, though NIOSH now does both certifications. Even though it says it has to be FDA cleared, NIOSH does the fluid penetration certification also. Very good. Awesome.
Speaking of fluids, here you go, Rick.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Is that mine or yours? I forget.
That's yours. Go ahead.
I jumped ahead. So you can see a surgical mask is not a respirator, but an N95 is a respirator because it's NIOSH certified. The surgical mask is more than a cloth face covering, the homemade type. It has to be cleared by the FDA for like the fluids and things like that. So it's more for source control. It does help collect the large particles, but it doesn't seal. It doesn't seal on the side. You don't know what the efficacy of the face mask itself is as far as, penetration by small particles. So it doesn't really provide respiratory protection, whereas the N95 does have to meet very stringent standards for particle penetration, sealing, all that stuff. So that's the big difference. One's tight fitting, the other's loose fitting. And obviously you can't fit test a loose fitting respirator, but you can fit test an N95. And we'll talk about fit testing also.
So one of the questions you want to ask is when we're talking about, we go back one? I'm sorry. No, we're good. Can the hazard be controlled? And this is something that you want to think about. And when we think about can hazard be controlled, I want you to think about the hierarchy of controls. Because anytime we design a program, OSHA is asking us to look at and evaluate the hierarchy of controls. So where we're looking at things, can we substitute? Are there engineering controls? Are there administrative work practices that we can put into place? And then, if not, is it a required respirator use or is it a voluntary use? So I want 2 points. I want to point out 2 things. First of all, take out your check sheets, so have them readily available. And then you see the little icon with the magnifying glass with the plus sign. That's going to be your indicator that if we're talking on that slide, there might be something you want to look at on your check sheet to make a note on. So from here on out, there might be things that we're going to add that might be value added for your respirator program.
It worked.
So, yes, it works. Hierarchy of controls. What we're looking at is, again, you guys have seen this before, elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. But let's walk through what would that look like for a respirator scenario. So we've used for a long time elimination. Back in the day, and I guess I'm aging myself and Rick because, Rick's older than I am. No, but anyways, bottom line is we used to use a lot of lead paint. And lead paint was out there. So that's been one thing that's basically kind of been eliminated. I believe there still might be some military specs that use it, but for the most part, it's eliminated in the general population. So we're not using it. So that would be elimination. So then we have to substitute it with a new product. So what we did is we eliminated lead and went to solvent-based paint. Well, what we found out is that we could create, and the manufacturers did create, some wonderful water-based materials that we could then substitute, and now we've gone from lead to solvent to water-based, and that's all great. Well, maybe there's still some concerns. So now we're looking at, okay, can we do it in a controlled environment? Maybe it's a spray booth where we have a vent system, a downdraft, updraft. It depends on what we're doing, but there could be controls. There'll be engineering controls that might be ventilation. If that's even over the limit, then one thing we would look at is administrative controls. And maybe what we do is we change the amount of time that our people are exposed when they're painting. Instead of painting for 8 hours a day, we're only going to do it for 3 or 4. Now, personally, if I was a person wearing the respirator, I don't want to be wearing it for 8 hours a day because I've had to do that, and it's not fun. So my control would be, let's do all these other things before they have to put me in that respirator. And again, remember that very last line of defense is wearing the respirator. Now, one thing you also want to keep in mind is that OSHA will look at and address, have you evaluated those hierarchy of controls and documented that evaluation?
Awesome. Good explanation of that hierarchy. What you have to evaluate is how your respiratory protection is going to be used. If you as a company are requiring the employees to wear respirators, no matter the exposure, you're saying when you do this job, you have to wear this respirator. If that's the case, you have to have a full-blown written respirator program with medical evaluations, fit testing, program administrator, and training. OSHA looks at it also as if you have exposures that exceed occupational exposure limits, the OSHA PEL. In that case, you have to put your people in those respirators until you can reduce those exposures through following the hierarchy of control. If this isn't feasible, you've got the exposures down as low as you can get them through engineering and substitution elimination, then your last line of defense, as Deb said, is your PPE or your respirator. Another time you might need a respirator is while engineering controls are being repaired or installed. And then certain specific standards have a little more stringent respiratory protection requirements that you might have to follow in those instances. So whenever you require the respirator, or it's used to protect employees' health. Now, with COVID, there's no occupational exposure limit, but it's a recognized hazard, and it has potential for serious physical and health hazards. So in that case, even though there's no exposure limit, OSHA is still requiring respirator usage in certain industries. Okay. So remember.
Exactly. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. remember, it's only for temporary or supplemental use while engineering controls are being implemented, or if engineering controls are not feasible to reduce the exposures below safe limits.
And the written program is required when you require that. If where respirators are necessary to protect the health of the employee, maybe there's an over and exposure, or if the employer is requiring that. So regardless of whether there's an overexposure limit, if the employer says thou shalt wear a respirator, then thou shalt have a written program. So speaking about the program, here's the elements that OSHA requires. So this is a quick one. We're going to just go over them real quick because I want you to make sure that you're addressing these on your check sheet. Proper selection of the respirator. Can I just slap any old respirator on anybody and hopefully it works for all those things? No, they're designed for and fitted and used for specific purposes. So we have to know what that is. And there's protection factors built into these. So we have to know what the exposure limit is so that we know that we're wearing the right one for the right purpose. We have to be medically evaluated before we wear a respirator. So that's one of the first things that you want to do. Proper fit testing, proper use, inspection, cleaning, and storage. That's a huge one. That one I see probably gets cited very often because storage is usually the low-lying fruit. I can walk through facilities and find at least one respirator hanging somewhere, which I would never put it on, but I'm just saying. Breathing air quality, again, that has to do with the air-supplied respirators. Training. And training, the annual training requirements, the program evaluation, and then the record keeping.
One thing I'd like to point out, Deb, the cost of a written respirator program may justify the cost of installing those engineering controls, which aren't cheap up front, but a respirator program has a lot of and some of you have them, I know, because I've been at your facility, have a lot of ongoing costs year after year, annual fit testing. The cost of respirators themselves, the filters, the cartridges,
right? Yeah,
the wages of your program administrator. It adds up over time. So maybe you can justify installing those engineering controls. So basically, if you have overexposures, and we like to repeat ourselves occasionally, is if you have overexposures or you require thou shalt wear a respirator, then you need the full program. And you can't put them in the respirator until after they've had a medical evaluation, after they've had training on proper use, fit, and care, and know the limitations of the respirator, and then after they've been fit tested. You have to do that all before you put them in a respirator. If it's required, the program's required. You also, when you do the medical evaluation, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to send them for a physical. Basically, they fill out a questionnaire, and based on the answers to that questionnaire, the licensed healthcare professional or physician will determine if there's follow-up. Now, if it's a young person, they don't smoke, they're in good health, they may just fill the questionnaire out, and the physician will say they're good to go. But if it's someone who smokes, who's overweight, has pre-existing conditions, chances are there's going to be some sort of follow-up medical exam.
Right. One thing I want to point out too.
Okay, go ahead.
For the medical surveillance, a lot of feedback I would get is people said, I'm not filling that out and giving it back to you because you'll look at it. And I'm like, what we would do is we would print out the medical evaluation form and put in an envelope, a sealed self-addressed envelope stamped, so that the employee could fold it up, seal it, and pop it in the mail and send it back to the medical facility. The response you get back will be, yes, they can wear a respirator, or no, they can't wear a respirator. And that's what you're going to get back from them. Okay, so just clarifying that for your folks.
Okay. Again, you have to do fit testing annually. And basically, fit testing checks the effectiveness of the fit of the respirator. Now, there's different requirements. If you require respirators, fit testing is required. If it's voluntary use, meaning there's no overexposures, you're not requiring them to wear a respirator, then you don't have to do fit testing. Fit testing is not required because OSHA says there's no airborne hazard here. It's just they would like to wear a respirator, they can. So there's two types of fit testing. The first is qualitative, which is basically your go, no-go test. The test agent is either a sweetener or a bitter tasting substance called Beatrix, or they kind of want to get away from irritant smoke. But basically, it's pass. You either can taste it or smell it or feel it, or you can't. So it's pass, fail test. The other one is the quantitative test, where you come up with a fit factor, which measures the effectiveness or the leakage of the respirator, and it has to pass certain fit factor levels. And it's all done automatically by that machine right there, is an example of one. It has to be done annually and before they wear a respirator in the workplace if it's required.
Okay.
What you also have to do if respirators are required is a user seal check, and this should be done every time they put on a respirator. And the reason for this, it just checks that they're wearing it properly, and it kind of assures that it's going to provide the protection you want it to provide. So it just shows you that there's ways to check N95s, and there's other ways to check elastomeric respirators with the positive, negative fit check.
Okay.
These aren't substitutes for fit testing by any means. It's just a check they do every time they wear the respirator. We call it the Battle of the Beards. As you can see, ZZ Top probably can't wear a tight-fitting respirator if it's required. But basically,
I don't
what
think
OSHA
Bob
says,
can either, right, Rick?
Yeah, Bob is
can either, right?
not going to pass either.
Oh.
So what OSHA says, any facial hair that interferes with the face piece seal needs to be shaved. You're not even allowed to fit test them if they have facial hair. So we call it the Battle of the Beards because it's always a battle. Now remember, if it's voluntary use, they can have a ZZ Top beard because OSHA doesn't care. There's no respiratory hazard there. You've identified there's no overexposures or no potential for overexposures. And you're not requiring the use of respirators.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the maintenance, inspection, and storage of respirators. Again, this is probably the low-lying fruit I see the most. You want to make folks to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Read and heed. That respirators are clean, sanitary, and good operating condition. I mean, if you're doing a walk through your facility and you know that there's people that wear respirators, even if they're not using them, check and see where they're stored. Are they storing them properly? Are they just hanging them up, in a locker or on a nail or on the fire extinguisher? Inspected by the wearer prior to use. We want to make sure that they're in good condition before we even put them on and do that qualitative fit testing. Stored in a convenient, clean, and sanitary location, and then clean and disinfect it. We want to make sure we know how to clean and disinfect them. Some of the ones are disposable. We don't need to do that, but know when they should turn them back in. When should I get rid of one and get a new one? That's something that you want to make sure you're training your people on. So let me ask you this. Would you guys wear any of these respirators that we see? You could say yes or no, would you like this storage concept? I always thought it was interesting that when they put a respirator down, they put the part that goes over your face up so it catches all of the debris. So when you go to put it on, you're breathing all that contaminant in. So again.
Well, you're tasting it too.
Yeah.
Right?
Again, very similar things we see. We see this quite often in the field. So.
We like to put this one up because it shows all the parts of a respirator, and it shows you why people need to be trained on how to take these things apart and clean them properly and then put them back together. All that protects you really is a little flapper valve, a little disc of rubber, and they have to make sure those things are still pliable and plastic and not hard as a rock, or they need to replace them. A lot of times they don't even buy, they don't know what they are and they don't get replaced. I see a lot of respirators without those in place. So you need to train them on how to take them apart and inspect them. And we did this little chart because there's visual learners out there that shows, if you start square one at the top left, you take it apart, you wash it in warm, rinse it in warm water, rinse it off, dry it. I think that's what that one means. Then rinse it in a cleaning solution, not solvents. Rinse it again, dry it, put it back together, and then, do a user seal check, inspect it, make sure it's all put back together properly. So there's steps involved, a process.
So one of the other things we want to talk about is the program administrator. There has to be somebody assigned with the responsibility and authority for the respirator program. And if that's you, lucky you. Again, what we're going to look at is we want to make sure that you have the appropriate training, experience, that you evaluate the respirators program's effectiveness. Consult with the employees wearing the respirators. Find out, are they having issues? Are they having problems? Is it working? Is there something better we can do? You want to maintain your records and your written procedures. Make sure that they're updated. Every time you change a chemical, you want to verify that that chemical is compatible with the respirator that you're using. So this can also lead into HAZCOM concerns. Also make sure that you're documenting your annual training and your fit testing. Let me just real quick, which one is a respirator, A or B? Let's see how many people respond. Oh, they're moving. I see them.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes. They got it. Yes. We're so happy. You're right. B is the correct answer.
So we like to boil it down to a step program. And if you look at it this way, it kind of simplifies things. If your respiratory usage is mandatory or necessary, you're in the 9-step program, which is the full written respirator program. If you're only voluntarily using respirators, and it's any type of respirator other than the filtering face piece respirator or the N95s, then you're in the 3-step program. This would be, you have to train people on Appendix D, which is read and heed the warnings about the respirator, know its limitations, know how to care for it. You also, in the 3-step, have to be medically evaluated and cleared to wear the respirator because it's the elastomeric. It has that added breathing resistance, and you have to be trained in how to properly clean, store, and maintain that respirator because OSHA doesn't want the respirator itself to be a hazard. So that's the 3-step. If you're in the 1-step program, meaning all you use are filtering face piece respirators, the disposable or N95s, the only thing you have to do is Appendix D, which is read and heed the warnings on the box. Now remember, Step 3 and Step 1, no fit testing is required on either one. You can have beards, you can do everything wrong, which doesn't make sense, but you can. Remember, the 9-step, you have to follow everything to the letter of the law. So voluntary use is basically when the employee chooses to wear the respirator. Maybe it's a job like they're using a broom to clean up at the end of the day, and there's not an overexposure. It's just nuisance dust, and they don't like it. So they want to wear an N95. Well, all you got to do is train them on Appendix D of the standard. No exposure limits. You've done the air monitoring. Came out, did the monitoring. You're well below OSHA limits. You're good to go. It can be voluntary use then. And then you as the employer do not require your people to wear a respirator. Then you can use the voluntary usage exemption. Okay. I guess we probably covered that, right, Deb? Pretty
okay, we can
clearly.
move on.
And so we'll ask.
If you want to answer in the chat, yeah. So for a voluntary use of this respirator, which we all said was a respirator, which program would meet the OSHA regulations? The 9-step, the 3-step, or the 1-step? So real quick, type in there. what you think.
Oh, wow. This is a smart class.
They are
AP,
smart.
This is for Carrie.
Yeah,
this is AP Safety
This
Council.
is the AP respirator class, right?
This is all Appendix D set. This is right out of the standards. So there's a lot of discretion here. Basically, it says read and heed the manufacturer's instructions on use, maintenance, cleaning, and care. Make sure they understand the limitations of the respirator. So an N95 respirator doesn't filter out organic solvent vapors or gases. It only works with particulates, dust, mist, and fumes are particulate. They do recommend that you choose a NIOSH certified respirator for voluntary use, though I don't think they'll cite you if you use a non-NIOSH one. But we recommend just get all the non-NIOSH ones out of there and just use N95s for voluntary use. You do not wear your respirator in atmospheres containing contaminants for which it's not designed to protect against. And keep track of your respirator. Don't use someone else's and throw it away when it gets dirty.
Yeah, that's even more important during COVID, right? We don't want to be using somebody else's respirator. So, all right. So real quick, I said at the end, there's a new guidance. I think this actually webpage has changed. But when you open up OSHA's page, it'll say coronavirus resources. If you want to click on the guidance document, it's going to take you to that link that's going to talk about the prevention program. And there's basically roughly 16 steps or something to this. And again, most of these, when you guys read through them, you've already got them. You've got somebody who's coordinating it. You have a hazard assessment of where and how people can get COVID, methods to control the spread, et cetera, education, training, instruct infected employees. Most of this we've all seen. We've been through it. We've seen it. So the key here is making sure that you have all of this documented and you have a policy in place. So here's this is what we talked about today. The elements of the OSHA respirator program, what a respirator is, and what's OSHA up to regarding COVID. So basically, that's it in a nutshell. We did that pretty good, Rick. I was pretty darn close.
Yeah. We're concise.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Good timing, guys. If anybody has any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can type them in the chat. We'll leave that up for a second. And if you could give a clap, go to your reactions down at the bottom, or you could do a party, I don't know, whatever that is, the party one where you blow confetti all over the place. Look at all those clapping. They love you. They love you. Good stuff. I really think the handout that Deb gave you is going to be really helpful. The PowerPoint we're going to be able to send out, right? So we can send that out when we send out the recording to this. And if there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the one and we'll see. If you still have questions, it's okay. We'll entertain those for sure. But our next speaker in June, we are going to, if I can get this to pull up correctly, of course it's going to do that. Our next speaker in June is going to be Kathy Cern and Carmen, and I'm not even going to attempt that last name, but we had them speak at Medina, and I'm sure some of you remember Kathy speaking a little while ago at Summit. Really, really good information. It's not a certification, of course, but it is really good information that everybody can use, and hopefully you'll never have to use, but everybody should know going forward in life. So that might be a really good one to just invite your first aid team to. You're welcome to send out invitations to other folks when you get the invitation from Sally. If you want to include your first aid group, it's kind of a good refresher on Stop the Bleed. That might be a good opportunity. And I am not seeing any questions. We appreciate you guys. You did awesome, Deb and Rick. Glad to see you. It's nice. I think they're excited to get to see somebody besides just me. But if there's no other questions, folks, you are welcome to leave. We appreciate you being here. And going forward, if you have questions, Rick, myself, Deb, any of us, we're here to help you. So don't feel like you're in this alone. That's one of the biggest things with safety is you always feel like you're alone because you're working in the facility a lot of times by yourself, and it feels like you're swimming upstream every day. So we are here to talk you off that bridge if needed, or even just provide you some resources or support. So thank you guys, and I wish you a nice, warm, and sunny rest of the month. Bye, y'all. I had my camera off that last time. That was fun.
Yeah, you did. I was like, where's your camera?
I know. Don't you hate that?
I do.
I'm going to stop
No,
sharing.
I don't. I don't even mind.